what I want to try to do with this, and we can kind of workshop it, and we're going to come up with a name, is get underneath the doctors to the human being, so that people can understand the types of personalities that built the airway industry.
Cool.
So it started in the Air Force, right? You started in the Air Force, or you were in the military?
I was.
Tell me that story.
Well, actually, it started when I was 2.
You can tell that one too.
When I was 2 years old, I got my head caught in a fence in a park. They had to call the fire department to get my head out. And they asked me why I did it. And I said, because I wanted to see if it would fit. So that was sort of the birthplace of my curiosity.
Is that a true story?
It is a true story.
I had no idea about that. I didn't even know you could think that way too.
Well, it's easy. When you put your head in, the ears are going one way. When you try to take it out, your ears get in the way.
So, you've never told me that story before.
I have things I hold back. So.
Okay. All right. So then what happened from there?
Well, I went to college. I was a history major. Actually, I went to college. I was an engineering major because it was in the 50s and Sputnik and everybody wanted to be an engineer. And I was going to be an aeronautical engineer. And I didn't have a clue what that was. And then I got there and they gave me a drawing board and a T-square. And I said, you have to stay within the lines? I don't want to do this. Is this what engineering is? I don't want to do that. So during my course of college, I was a engineer, physics, chemistry, biology, economics major. And I finally graduated as a history major. And I knew exactly what I wanted to do. I was going to become a history professor because I get to smoke a pipe. I get to have a nice jacket with elbow patches. And all the co-eds will hang out with me. So that would be great. My parents said, teacher, professor, you got to be a doctor, a lawyer, a dentist, pick something. So my cousin was a dentist and he talked me into going to dental school. I hated dental school. It was structured. It was, you had to do things a certain way. You had to go to class. They took attendance every time. I went through college. Nobody ever took attendance. As long as you did okay, you were okay. So, freshman, taking biochemistry, the professor who taught it basically read from the book. And I said, I don't need to sit here and listen to him read the book from the book. So I just went to the library and I studied. I got an A in biochemistry, and I was put on probation for not following the rules. So that probably was the start of my career.
And also a poker player.
And a poker player. I worked my way through college. I had a little bit of a scholarship because, in those days, tuition was like enormous. It was like, in college, tuition was $22 a credit. And when it went up to 24, we protested because if we don't protest and draw the line somewhere, before we know it, it'll be at $25 a credit. That's not even a blip on the radar screen. So I played poker. I also worked at the racetrack during the summer, and I basically paid all my living expenses from what I won at the racetrack. I didn't view it as gambling. It was just sort of analyzing and finding a solution to a problem.
It's kind of interesting because you're something of a gambler in what you do at those events too. I mean, you talk about that before they start. You're like, well, we start with no money in the bank and we make all these commitments and we hope we're going to beat
but
right?
Life is a gamble. Every time we cross the street, we are gambling. We don't know what's going to happen, and some people are more risk takers than others. There are some people, they can get a job, civil servant, or not to knock civil servants or anything, where they're going to be taken care of for everything. They don't have to make a decision. There's no risk taking. And the world needs everybody. That maybe it's an adrenaline thing. Maybe it was my airway problem back there where I just need that adrenaline to keep me going. So I needed to do something like that.
So let me ask you this. You mentioned risk taking a couple of times. Back then, there's probably not a more conservative medical discipline. I mean, they were all conservative, but than dentistry. So how do you reconcile a love of risk with becoming a dentist? Like, how did that inform your path moving
So
forward?
my parents said, your your cousin Sherman's going to talk to you and guide you in the proper career path. It wasn't my career path. It was whatever they decided. I was a good kid then. And physicians, long hours, stay up late, lawyers, you never know what kind of job. Dentist was like the last bastion of the rugged individual. You don't have people telling you what to do. You have more freedom in practicing. And even though, and dentistry was so much different than, first thing they teach you is how to put a mercury filling in. And in those days, you mix the mercury with the silver paste in a mortar and a pestle, and then you pick it up and you squeezed out the excess mercury with your fingers. And so now my first day in the clinic, they say, and there were no gloves then because there were no germs then. Germs were sort of new. So you wring the excess mercury out with your fingers, and you say, when you're in the clinic, make sure you take off all your rings and your watches, any jewelry, because the mercury vapor is going to ruin your jewelry. So you say, excuse me. I thought you said no mercury leaks out. How does it get? Oh, don't worry about that. This is the way we do it. That was always the way we do it. And so that was dentistry in 1960s. I graduated dental school in 1966. And it was very focused on repairing teeth. Dentistry fought not to be included in the Medicaid system in 1968, because they said, we're not really doctors, we just sort of repair teeth. And so they were able to be excluded from, there's no dentistry. Maybe now they have Medicare Advantage that has dentistry in it. And dentistry was about problems that happen with teeth. Even orthodontia was, mother takes a kid to the orthodontist, show these beautiful shiny models. In orthodontic school, you learn how to make beautiful models, line them up, and you show the mother the models, what the teeth look like. And then 2 years later, you show the mother the models again. This is what you got for your money, beautiful, nice wide smile. But always you got to look at the patient head on, because if you look from the side, you see that maybe they don't have much of a face. Their faces.
But when did you start to pick that up? Because everything that you're describing to me is, I was a good kid, raised the right way for the right reasons, to do the right thing and stay inside the lines.
But that's my view of it. That might have been other people's. That's my view of it. I'm a good kid. I believe I was a good student. But I ask questions like, why do things have to be done that way? I think that one of the things early on in my career. Well, let's fast forward to like my first year out of the Air Force in practice, and I met Harold Gelb. Harold Gelb is Michael Gelb's father. He was one of the pioneers in TMJ therapy. There was no TMJ therapy. And he was saying, you guys, this is great. Everybody's got to do it. I was at a workshop this weekend. I said, Harold was a very arrogant person. And I looked over to Michael Gelb, Harold's son, and I said, is it right if I say that? He said, yeah, he was arrogant. But pioneers need to be arrogant, because he didn't care what anybody said. This is what he believed in. You're just pushing his agenda forward. And so I learned to do TMJ. And back in the late 60s and early 70s, there were all these people doing really incredible things. Harold Gelb, Brendan Stack, Willie Mays. They were like treating people for dental things and curing problems. changing their health. They were treating people with cancer. There was a dentist who was it said every cancer patient had to have a TMJ appliance or an oral appliance because it helped balance things. They didn't know about Airway then; it was just balance. And I inherited some of the patients from that dentist after a while. And in retrospect, we can talk about what the explanation was, but they were doing fantastic things back then. But it sort of fell into this quiescent period because you couldn't explain it. You couldn't go to a physician and say, well, we're balancing something in the body. It couldn't be explained. Same thing with myofunctional therapy. Daniel Garlina was teaching myofunctional therapy. In the 1970s, in our office, we were doing functional orthodontics based on the European orthodontist and John Witzik. And then it sort of, it didn't go away, but it went sort of
Quieted down a little bit.
Quieted down. And then there was more dental insurance, and dentists were making a lot of money just doing crowns. When I started in practice, if you wanted to make a crown, you had to wax up the crown in the mouth. And you had to take it off very gingerly and then invest it, cast it. It was a lot of work to make one crown. There were no fancy impression materials where you could just take an impression. And it took, to make a 3-tooth bridge would be 3 or 4 visits in order to do that. And then you had to make the individual pieces, put them in the mouth, take a little tray of plaster because there was no rope, and put it in. And then, of course, it broke when you took it out. Then you had, because it was plaster, you had to fit the pieces together so they fit. And that's how you made a bridge. So it really wasn't worth people's time to do that. My first class in dental school was the first class to use the high-speed drill. Before that, it was a low speed. You remember there was these little belts that turned, and before that, in the service, they would have foot pedals, like the old sewing machines. Mm-hmm. So if you wanted to have a fast dental visit, you'd look at the legs of the dentist. The dentist that had strong legs would be you get things done quicker. But and so when I started in dental school, high speed drill, new impression material, better materials. Everything was made in gold, so you couldn't make porcelain over the gold because the temperature that you have to make the porcelain is higher than the melting point of gold. So if you so you only made porcelain teeth in the front, and everything in the back was gold. But in that golden ages, in that age of dentistry, things changed so that the dentistry could be done much quicker and better. And so that made a difference. It also probably created more dentistry because there was no really specialty of endodontics, root canal. But now that everybody was making crowns, they were killing more nerves and things were done. They were causing more problems. Periodontal treatment became more necessary because you're making crowns and they weren't shaped right. They weren't shaped like teeth, and the gums were become inflamed. And so that dentistry begat more dentistry. And so from every year, from 1968, which was the first year of dental insurance, to 2008, when we had our first financial crisis, the average dentist made more money every year than the year before. It just expanded. And all of a sudden, after 2008, things changed. And then the only things that became really more, the two most important part of dentistry were implants and sleep, which was probably a good thing that happened. It came at a time when that was necessary.
So when along that journey, and I have a question, what you said about arrogance and pioneers, but I'll wait on that one. When during that journey do your eyes open to the importance of Airway as it connects to dentistry?
So two things. In early 70s, I took a course in mind dimensions. I was doing TMJ therapy, and there was a course given where somebody said you should take this course with. His name was Dr. Canastraci taught it. It was related to you would go into like a meditative state, and you learn to, instead of just going to sleep, you stay somewhere between that state of awakeness and sleep, where you're in the state where you could get subliminal messages, but instead of somebody else giving them to you, you give them to yourself. And so you do it it's a 4-day course, 12 to 14 hours a day, and you keep practice going back and forth until you stay in that place. It's called the Mind Dimensions. It was the last time I ever had a headache. I went to learn how to treat TMJ patients, but last time I ever had a headache. And then you do things like going to the city. He said, I am going to visualize a parking spot being there when I get there. And a parking spot would be there. And then he teach things like, it's called the white frame technique. You have a problem and you draw up the image of that problem. You don't change the problem. You change the frame from a black frame to a white frame, and you breathe, and things just change. And I said, here I go to school. I learn all this science. And all of a sudden, this is hocus pocus. How can my headache go away? So now I got really interested. I got involved in acupuncture and homeopathy and all these things that weren't taught in dental school. I included more nutrition in my practice. I became one of the first acupuncturists to be certified in New York State. I think my number is like 12 or something like that. And we were doing acupuncture for people with TMJ problems. And in fact, one of the things, there are 2 acupuncture points on the leg for gets rid of premenstrual cramps. So my staff would figure out when they were getting their period, and they would make sure that I was there that day. But it's not rocket science. A lot of medicine is rocket science. It's the purview of the trained professional. It doesn't take rocket science to stick a needle somewhere. So my daughter was unhappy because she was the last one to get her period. She said, I'm going to get my period. Everybody else got it. I'm never going to get it. I feel terrible. And then finally she says, how long is this going to last? How many more months of this do I have to put up with? So I just showed her acupuncture, and we did it, and it really took the premenstrual cramps away. And I said, let me show you how to do it. Because she was a senior in high school. I showed her how to do it, and I sent her off to college, University of New Hampshire, with acupuncture needles, whole box, so she'd be good for the year. 2 months later, she calls me, she says, Dad, I'm out of needles. I said, okay.
Over friends.
Who are you doing this for? I said, what do you have, a practice up there? And so I said, no, but you be careful. And later on, she became an acupuncturist and a craniosacral therapist. But a lot of what medicine and dentistry does is a lot of it's great. You need the training, but a lot of it is common sense. And it shouldn't be mystified and become so specialized, as where people have to learn to take care of themselves better.
I want to ask you some questions about leadership, because you said that visionary people are arrogant, but you're a visionary, and I know you well, and you have your quirks, but arrogance is not one of them. And given how intelligent you are, and what a great sales guy you are, and what a great awareness you have of risk, the pursuit of wealth has never been a motivator. The accumulation of huge wealth has never been a motivator for you either, which tends to be what visionary leaders do. So how do you reconcile what you've seen in other people versus kind of the contrary personality traits that you have against your ability to get people to come together toward a common goal?
Everybody wants what they want for whatever reason they want it. Everybody wants to have enough money. And then what's enough money? My brother-in-law, who had twice as much money as I ever had never had enough money because he needed money for something. In homeopathic medicine, they taught growth should be vertical, not horizontal. Does somebody who has one kid need a house with 5 bedrooms and 5 bathrooms and a 4-car garage? Maybe, but that's not health, in my opinion. And everybody has things that give them a feeling of reward, like the dopamine fix, like same thing you get with drugs or alcohol. You feel good when you get that fix. My fix is changing the world. That it shouldn't be that way. When I was a teenager, I was unhappy with the world because it wasn't the way I want. So my parents sent me for therapy. Back in the 50s or 60s, that's unusual to go to therapy, but it was a Park Avenue therapist, so it must be good because Park Avenue is in New York City, and that's where all the good doctors are because they charge the most.
Right.
And I wasn't very talkative, and so we played chess, and we played. That's how he got me to talk. We began to talk things, and he said, you have to understand. The world can't be the way you want the world to be. And I would say, why can't the world be the way? And he said, because that's the way it is. We can't. And so I went for maybe 6 months of therapy. And then my last appointment, which I said, I know it's going to be my last time because it was Saturday. I'd much rather be playing baseball anyway. And we played chess. I beat him in like 10 minutes, and I said, you're not really a good chess player, and I'm not coming back. I'm finished. But I understand the world can't be the way you want it to be. So you can either accept it, or you can try to make it the way you want it to be. And that's my juice. That's how I get my excitement. You know that I'm 81 years old. I go to work. I see patients. I manage an organization, which I started a foundation, wrote a book, and I love everything I do. I never have a day where I get up where I say, God, what am I going to do today? I get up and say, how the hell am I going to get through the day? But I don't get think, well, what am I going to do today?
What about the part, one of the things that you always say to me, because I'm a little bit more animated I'm a little bit more short-tempered than you are, perhaps. I have less tolerance for people than you do. But
you can ask my wife.
One of the things you've always said to me, or used to when we first met, was that everybody has value. You would say that to me. Everybody has value. Where did that come from, and how do you? I would say that's one of your superpowers in building the AAPMD is seeing the value, especially in the difficult personalities, the big egos, all that stuff. Like, how did you find that as a mantra, and how have you used that to build the organization?
Well, when you walk into a room, you could either say, well, how do I impress everybody with who I am? And everybody has good traits and bad traits. And if you look for the bad traits, if you're looking to say, am I better? Do I have value in this room? Maybe you look for the bad traits because then you say, well, that I'm better than because they have these bad traits. But if you are okay with who you are, you might say, let me see the value in everybody because, after doing what I've been doing for so many years, we have patients who come into the office who've been suffering for years with pain, anxiety, depression, and staff says, God, why do you take them? They're not nice. But you listen to their story and you say, God, after listening to the story, if I was that way, I would be as bad as they were. And we've also seen that if we can help them, we can lift them, we can help them breathe better, we can calm their nervous system, they change. That people always try to be the best they can be. And we have no way of judging what their best is. Why would anybody want to be less than their best? It makes no sense. So And we've been successful because our organization has grown in this time when most organizations are not growing. And we try to find a way that we're inclusive. Anybody who believes Airway is important, that people have value, and if we can remove the obstacles for them realizing their potential, they can realize their potential, then they're invited to have a seat at the table with an equal voice and be accepted. When Joy Moeller started teaching myofunctional therapy to hygienists, she violated the rules of the organization IAM that she was at the time, and she was asked to leave, and she was very unhappy. So I invited her to come and be a member of our organization, and which made her happy, and it really helped out. She was the first myofunctional therapist as part of the AAPMD. The universe always gives you these wonderful gifts. I think everybody gets gifts. Some of them, like, you don't see the gift and you say, what is that thing in the way? You kick it over to the side. Right. But the universe gives us these excellent gifts. And then the IAOM came and said, well, you're not giving us attention. I said, well, you say that Airway is not important. It's not in your bylaws. You can't talk about it. And then a year later, they came back and said, we changed the bylaws. Can we be part of your community? So anybody who believes that people can realize their potential through having a better airway, breathing better, and you can't separate that from nutrition and posture and stress reduction, because even if you suffered because you had a poor airway and you had to compensate and you did things that might not be viewed well by other people, and then you correct that problem, the root cause airway, you have all these bad habits. You have these habitual things that you have to unlearn. Then you have to learn how to behave without that compensation. If you walk with a crutch for 10 years and all of a sudden you don't have to, you have certain ways that you walk that you have to relearn that.
That you got to fix.
It's like the same thing with recovering. That's one thing, you stop the use, but then all the behavior that went along with it requires change in your life. So unlike other organizations, we need to continue to grow to include all these things as part of the organization. It's not making an appliance or doing one technique. That these techniques are part of a unique, incredibly miraculous human who is so much more. And the question should be not what is the right appliance for this patient, how do we help this person become all that they can be in life? It's the same thing when my daughter-in-law Jill, who works as great orthodontist trained by Bill Hang, that some of the parents, they don't even see the potential in their own kids. They talk about their children in that room as if they're not there. They talk about they. If you honor people and you help them to become, with the goal of helping them to become who they are, it's an incredible gift you give them and a gift you give to yourself.
What about leadership? What are your, you've been leading organizations you started that other one you were involved with in the 80s. So it's been about 40 years.
It was called FAME, the Foundation for the Advancement. Well, I sort of became the leader because it was a time in New York when doctors were practicing functional medicine. At the time, it was called alternative medicine because it was the nutrition doctors like Robert Atkins and Michael Schachter and Serafina Crisella, and who never got along because they were always competing with each other. But now they were all under attack, so when people are under attack, they circle the wagons and they have to get together. And somebody said, you'd be interested in that. Why don't you come along? I said, well, I'm a dentist. Come along. And since I was the only person who got along with everybody, they said, you be the president. It's okay. So I became, I think my best quality as a leader is I'm able to get people to sit in a room and talk to each other who wouldn't necessarily talk to each other. And and I'm good at seeing the value in people, and getting people to join and accept the mission, keep them excited and invigorated to it, and when they want to quit, I don't let them.
I've noticed that.
I need to step back. I can't do this. No. Who told you? It's like the Hotel California. You can check out, but you can't leave.
Right. So it's interesting because you also are not afraid to get into the tough decisions. So you're kind of a dichotomy that way, where you're inclusive and you see the value in everybody. And
maybe I don't recognize they're tough.
Is that true?
I don't know.
You really don't? Because I see that. I definitely see that. And you're somebody who can find common ground with pretty much anyone. But, by definition, a leader does have to make the tough calls. Mm-hmm. And you do that almost in a way that it doesn't look like you're doing it.
It's interesting. I think sometimes I might allow people more leeway than I should. And when I should, I really need to make a change. Maybe I wait too long. But sometimes waiting turns out okay. Sometimes it doesn't. But one of the things I believe, that whatever came before doesn't necessarily have value in what comes ahead. You have to, like, etch a sketch. Remember etch a sketch, where you just pull up the thing and you start all over. That you have to be able to go into the room with a clean slate. When I was talking about this mind dimension as exercise, so one of the exercises is that I've used from 1973. When I go from one room to another, as I walk out of the room, I stop and I breathe, and I have visualized whatever issues and tension from that patient flowing through my body, down my feet, into the ground, and walk in the next room. I start fresh. I don't carry that stuff with me. Do I do it perfectly? No, not all the time. But how can you go and give somebody your best care if you're carrying your own garbage with you?
So you said earlier when we started talking that most visionaries are arrogant, which I would tend to agree with. I know you very well and you're a lot of things, but arrogant is not one of them. But you are a visionary.
And I am stubborn.
Yeah, that's true. But that's different from arrogant.
Right. I like that better.
Stubborn, yes, but arrogant is I know everything. You're not that guy.
And there's a difference between stubborn and persistent.
Yes.
You know what that difference is?
No.
If it's somebody else, they're stubborn.
If it's me, persistent, right. So how do you remain visionary from a place of humility? Because I think if there was one word that would be used to describe you from everybody who knows you best, but after like some version of a really nice human being, it would be humility. How do you continue to be visionary, a visionary leader from a place of humility for as many years as you've done it?
See, I don't view it as humility. I just think of it as, what am I trying to get done, and how do I do it? So if I've done it by not being arrogant and I've been successful, why would I want to change and do it any other way?
Well, one of the best definitions I've heard of humility is it's not thinking less of yourself. It's thinking about yourself less. And I think that's a definition I think would describe you pretty well.
Right. So
the question then becomes, how, from that place of humility where you're always thinking about those that you want to lead, how do you lay out that kind of vision and lead people when your mind is more on them and their well-being than it is on anything else? Growing
up in a Jewish family, you never answer a question without telling a story. That's part of. So in the 1990s, I was suffering from atrial fibrillation, irregular heartbeat, and my heart rate would go up to like 180. And I would find, I get up in the morning, go to the gym, get on the treadmill, and if I was going fast enough, it would go back into normal rhythm. But eventually, I went to see a cardiologist. Said you have to do something called an ablation, where they put wires up through your groin at your heart, and they find a place where you're getting these irregular beats, and they zap it and get rid of it. And in my case, it didn't work, and they had a bad outcome, and they fried the veins from my left heart to my lungs, so I basically had no oxygen coming from my left lung to my left side of my heart to my rest of my body. So I only can get at best 50 or 60% of oxygen. And nobody asked me, do you have sleep apnea or anything like that? At Columbia University, where they did the procedure, the electrophysiology department, where they do the ablation, is one door from the sleep department. And nobody said, before we send you to do this, maybe you should check your sleep. So they did 2 procedures, maybe helped a little bit. But when I looked at my sleep and dealt with it, that basically straightened everything out. And so I said, this is going to be my life goal. Nobody should have to go through what I went through when, with at least the knowledge of at least checking that out. And my second idea was, I'm going to outlive all of these doctors.
Which you've done.
And I'm working on it. There might be 1 or 2 left.
Right.
But then I have to find another reason for going on to live. But, everything that things happen, and you can always, whatever happens, the next point in life could always be bad things or good things. Depends on where you put your intention. I have been incredibly lucky that everything I've done, I think, has been successful. And if it's been a failure, then it pointed me in another direction that's been able to be successful. I am amazed by how many incredibly smart people that I wouldn't have the patience at this stage of my life to learn all the things that they can learn. But I know who they are, that I can call on them to do the things that I can't do. You don't have to be the person that does everything for everybody. You just need to know who you can call. And that's the basis of the AAPMD, a collaboration, that if you want somebody to get the best results they can get, what's the team you need for that patient? You need a dentist, a physician, physical therapist. Who do you need? And if each person, it might be different, but the one patient who has to be on every single team is the patient. Patient is not this thing that's being done something to or for, but has to be with. They have to accept that responsibility, which is the main difference between, call it functional medicine, and conventional medicine. The patient is not necessarily a partner in the treatment. All you got to do is take your pills and do what you're supposed to do. Yeah, maybe exercise a little bit, don't eat so much sugar, whatever. But in this type of medicine, if it's getting expansion, you gotta be able to turn the screw. You got to keep a lip seal. You have to be part of it. That if you take charge of your health and you're much more invested in it, those people who do will always have a better outcome, and they'll feel better because they know that their health isn't somebody else's responsibility. It's their own responsibility.
Collaboration. So here's what I notice about you is that collaboration is kind of at the core of who you are as a human being. You bring people together. It's just your nature as a leader. And then you also, as a highly effective person of medicine, realize that collaborative care is what's best for the patient. Was that a plan to have your life's work as an organizer and a leader intersect? And what did you notice that before I pointed it out? And
no, I know that we created this thing called Collaboration Cures, but we always had nutrition as part of our practice. That early on in practice, I loved doing surgery, so we did a lot of periodontal gum surgery, and I said, let me do an experiment. So I took 20 patients. Next 20 patients, when I did surgery for, and when I just did conservative care and changed the nutrition. Right after the surgery was done, everybody looked great because we removed all the unhealthy tissue. But 6 months later, the people who did the nutrition and without doing the surgery were better. And again, so the people who we did the surgery for, they just showed up and brought their mouth, and then we did what we did, and then they took better care. We gave them instructions. Some of them followed, some didn't. The ones we said, we're going to give you an opportunity to avoid surgery. You have to go home and do your home care, and we would do a week's diary, figure out what they ate, tell them to remove certain things, add certain supplements. And these people said, oh, it's great, my gums look good, but let me tell you something else. I am have more energy. I'm not, my aches and pains have gone away. And so that this was like, God, it's got to be late 60s, early 70s. Like, it's like 50 years ago. Like, seems like yesterday. And you involve people and you get them involved in their care, and you do things that, they're not taking a pill. All they're doing is buying different foods, and when people see that they can make their own change in their life that's going to be different, that makes a difference. And so, and then I love taking courses. So I would take courses, and then I decided I wanted to work Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. So I would work 12 hours Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Then I had Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday off. That was cool. So then I would take courses, and I go take all the courses all over the country. And if somebody, I like that course, can I come to your office? And those were like, in those days, people were honored that you asked to come to their office. Now they charge you to come to, but, I learned that some people really don't do in their office what they do when they're up on the podium lecturing. Like, you got to be calm, you got to treat everybody well. And then I go in somebody's office and he's yelling at everybody. But that's how you learn about things. And so that's how I learned how things work. And it wasn't necessarily dental office. There could be acupuncturists, physical therapists, homeopaths, see how people were treated different. There's a much big, back in the 70s, there's a big wave of that. So I guess that's where I had the beginning of doing things. Our FAME group, Foundation for the Advancement of Innovative Medicine, in the 80s and 90s, when these doctors were being attacked, it was the doctors, the public, the patients, and corporations, because everybody felt threatened. So everybody was really involved. And we got a bill passed in New York State that no physician should be prosecuted solely because their practice was different. It was the first legislation that was ever passed over the objection of the New York State Medical Society, ever, and in 197 years. So that was quite an achievement. And then our organization began to lose its steam because we accomplished our mission. And everything in every life and every organization has a mission. So the fact that we as the AAPMD are still growing and growing rapidly means we haven't accomplished our mission. But we are accomplishing our mission. And we've attracted such wonderful people. So
I was up at Bill and Debbie's retirement. Well, the new guy
party.
attended the party of the night.
Yeah.
And Debbie took me aside and said, it's really amazing what you've accomplished in business. Just speaking of, she said, you were just a guy struggling, right? And 10 years ago, that I was struggling. I haven't changed that much. I was struggling because there was only one client. Nobody knew what Airway was. So if you look at what's happened to my career and what's happened at Madrose and in our clients, Carlin Loria, Lauren Ballinger, Steve Karstenson's taken off, what Tim Hughes doing up here, Kathleen. And now, Greg and I are on the phone once or twice a week with practitioners saying, we're going to take this general and restorative practice or this perio practice, and we're going to completely flip it and be Airway first and Airway centric. to the mission and vision, did you ever see that 10 years ago, that we'd be here and, there'd be an ad agency specifically devoted to Airway, or all these practices specifically devoted to Airway? And then where do you see that going in the next 10 years if you could make the world go the way you wanted it to?
Wow, that'd be cool. Well, we're doing a webinar in 2 weeks based on the Dale Bredesen protocol. Dale Bredesen's a researcher who wrote a book, The End of Alzheimer's, and he has successfully reversed Alzheimer's in 300-400 patients. And not with any drug, but based on lifestyle changes. And of those lifestyle changes, there are 4 or 5 of them.
Sorry, go ahead.
There are 4 or 5 of them that are related to oral conditions. Mm-hmm. And what I envision is that dentists will be the physicians of the mouth, because when you have an ENT, it's ear, nose, and throat. Like, what's missing in the ENT? There's this little mouth part, which is ours, which are dentists own. No, I didn't envision there'd be a media company, because I didn't know there were media companies. We would just carve sketches on the wall of the cave if we want to leave a message for somebody. But I think it's amazing the changes that have occurred. I tell my grandchildren, I have the awareness of 5 generations. I clearly remember my grandparents and the life they had, and I see my grandchildren. My grandparents had an ice box where they had ice delivered. The bathroom was out in the hall. It was my grandfather delivered furniture with a horse and wagon. The world of my grandparents and the world of my grandchildren is probably the greatest change in all of recorded history that's ever occurred within those 5 generations. And the same thing has happened in healthcare. It's my mother lost a sister in the Spanish flu of 1916, 1918, whatever. And they were always concerned about, you got to take care of yourself, because you can't trust the healthcare. There were no antivirals, there were no antibiotics in those times. You had to take care of yourself. And so you had to eat right. You had to get enough sleep. The baby had to go out for an airing every day. No matter how cold it was, because it had sunshine on their face, so they didn't know it was vitamin D. And then we fast forward to World War II, the discovery of penicillin, where now we're going to have a medicine that's going to solve every problem. There's going to be a drug that can make you feel better. And we fast forward a little bit further again, and now we say, well, we've solved a lot of the problems. Now we're having all these chronic diseases that maybe they were there, but they didn't pay attention. Maybe it's the result of diet or lifestyle changes, but now we have these chronic diseases. And now it's a little bit changed a little bit more. Now all these young mothers with kids who want their children to be healthier, and it's almost, we're back to where we were back in the early 1900s. So it's interesting to live and see these changes. But now we have the wonderful benefit of communications, where you think something, you try something, you put it up on social media, you can change it. So the chances of moving this forward at an accelerated rate, I think it's great. And it's great if we build this community. Hopefully our community will continue to grow, and we'll work together, and somebody can replace me, or I can stay alive long enough for this to happen, with great people like you helping to get the word out, and the message reaching the public that this will happen in my lifetime. So make it happen for me, Peter.
All right.